Thank you. So, a little bit about me. I'm a developer. Mainly I write in .NET. Been doing it for quite a long time. But since I very first started writing code, I've never been able to see the screen properly. And most of the time, I try to keep that a secret. So it's a slightly strange talk for me, but really I'm trying to kind of communicate how that affects the way I code, and maybe it's kind of how we think about how other people work and maybe how we can adapt to accommodate them. So this is really about how I kind of adapt to accommodate myself. Something. Oh. Okay. Wrong slide. So this is actually almost part of the problem, is that I can't actually see my slides properly. So, that kind of is a bit indicative of the problem. So this is just what I'm guessing everyone else sees. I kind of put it unchanged on the screen, because when I'm working with people and I go to their desk and they say, can I just show you this bit of code? This might be what would come up on their screen, and it would be kind of small, and I would generally not have a clue. And things get worse as it gets blurred, and then it gets bright and I can't really see. So this is closer to what I would normally see when I'm looking at code. And so looking at what's on the screen, you can kind of see what's there. And normally I would kind of focus in on one bit of it, and I would work out what that said. And then I would sort of sit back and I'd look at the bigger picture. And as I navigate through code, I kind of have to remember the code that was there before, because I won't immediately see it. And it will take me time to actually absorb what I have seen. So this kind of impacts the way I work, but mainly the way I get around it is that I remember the structure of the code and where I've been, and I kind of what to expect. So I've already described remembering the code. Moving between the code, so navigating between one page of code and another page, is kind of a big deal. It involves reacquainting myself with what code was on that page. And if I'm kind of coding on my own, that's relatively easy, because you get the overall kind of view and you remember the shape and you know what was there. And then the last one, spotting bugs is probably the hardest thing I ever have to do at work, because when you can see the code, it's kind of pretty easy to spot the bug. But if you just look at a page and you're remembering what was there, you won't spot something that someone else has changed or introduced. Things that really help me are when there's good naming conventions in code, I can kind of use the keyboard and navigate around. White space can make things a lot harder for me, strangely, because it means there's less code on the screen. So I have to change the entire contents of the screen in order to then look at the next piece of information. Whereas with kind of less white space, I can remember more at once, and I don't have to reacquaint myself with that new set of data. And similarly, that applies to comments. Comments are great in code, generally when we're looking at and trying to understand code, but they can actually just be less concise noise that it's harder to work through. Other things that really get me is finding the mouse. So when we were looking at that big view, I kind of adapt my work environment at home, so I have a 55-inch screen, and that means that I can now sit back. When I first had my first job, and this is kind of the covering up what you can and can't see, I went in and I met the head of the firm. It was an accountancy firm, and I'm sitting in front of his desk and we're talking, and in the back corner of his office he had an Amstrad 1512 with a green screen, and on the screen was a program called SuperCalc, a way predecessor of Excel. And he said, I see you can't see too well. Can you see the the computer in the corner okay? And I said, yes. And my response was, I can see there's a computer in the corner. But afterwards, he's like, he thought my response was, I can see the numbers on the screen on the computer in the corner. So adapting my environment and having the big screens helps, but still context switching and changing what I'm working on is even more of a deal just from that visual perspective. Reviewing code is another area that's tricky because it really requires actually reading through all of the code. You can't make assumptions about what was there before, particularly when it's changed. Although code review tools obviously help because they highlight the things that have been changed. And the other one that I find really hard is when you're talking to someone and they refer to it and it's find that email or look at that document. And even if I've got 20 things open on my screen, it's still going to take me a minute to find the thing that I already had open to just get it up and recognize it and then be able to read it. I said getting the big screen didn't help, and that was kind of an interesting one because over the course of my career I've worked in lots of different places, and for a long time big screens were rare, and sometimes a 15-inch screen was considered top of the range. And then over time it became that I could say, I really need a big screen to work. And even more recently, just a few years ago, a company really pushed the boat out and they went completely exceptional and got me a 43-inch screen. And they put a lot of effort into making it work. And even when they had got it working, I couldn't see it. I couldn't see anything on it. And I realized, not until I'd actually left, that the issue was the glare from the overhead lights had made it almost invisible what was on it to me. And it didn't matter how big it was, I was never really going to be able to see it. If it had been in a better room with better contrast, that would have made the difference, even if it was a much smaller screen. Another one that I picked out here that's a challenge is doing lots of reading in meetings. Just because it's harder to read stuff, people often flick through documentation and so on in meetings, and that becomes really challenging and breaks the flow. And I put here again the big screen thing. People often think, oh, this will be great. We've got this meeting room with a big screen like this. You'll easily be able to see it. But even sitting here earlier, I'm right at the front, and I still can't see the detail on the big slides. So some people, I think a couple of times ago, or maybe a time ago, I was caught using my phone. So I'll take my phone out and I'll zoom in on the screen, and that'll allow me to see what's going on. So it's another sort of adaptation that allows me to work. I think one of the things that's happened in the last, well, since COVID really, is the mass adoption of working at home. And that's really made my life a lot better because it's actually so much easier using Teams. When you're sharing code, or someone's showing you something, the difference between that screen earlier where someone's got their code and it's at the size they work with, takes up their whole screen, and I just can't see it. Now I can get it on Teams and I can zoom in on things and I can really make the environment work for me, and it doesn't interfere with the way anyone else is working as it happens. So I would rather have a Teams call with someone sitting next to me almost, as antisocial as that is. I do miss the actual talking to people when there isn't looking at stuff. But that's separate. I've run towards the end. I thought I had more to talk about. But I think, to me, the purpose of this talk was to kind of describe the sort of things that impact me. And I can imagine, as I've thought about the talk, how just thinking about consciously about how things have affected me and how they affect other people makes me think about other people I'm working with, particularly other people that are remote, and that I don't really see their conditions and how they're working and how those things affect me. And it kind of challenges, it has challenged me to think about other things I can do questions that I can ask to take account to make things easier in the way other people work. That's me. That was very quick, wasn't it? Sorry.
Cool. Great stuff. Thank you so much, Alex.
Thank you.